Thank you very much for waiting. Now, we'd like to invite Mr. Nakagita, Mr. Usuki, Mr. Kobayashi, and Mr. Ban online. And on behalf of the organizer, Mr. Toshihiko Ota, Mayor of Toyota City, to the stage to review today's symposium. The moderator is again Suzuki, myself. The theme of this symposium is approach, and the slogan is create future through paper. If I interpret them, it means potential of creating things that paper has as material. I would like to ask all the lecturers and speakers to give us their comments, including the additional comments to your lectures and presentations. In the order of the program, first, Mr. Nakagita, please.
This is Nakagita from Taiho Washi Kogyo at Ise. And as Mr. Ban mentioned earlier, that people don't get killed in an earthquake. It's the buildings that collapse when people get killed. And you mentioned about the paper tubes used in your architecture, and you are making sure to secure safety, and that was very impressive. And Professor Usuki, you said to make things lighter is something that will be needed in the modern days and moving forward. At the same time, Mr. Kobayashi, what you mentioned was really striking because I am also a paper manufacturer just like you. So I was able to buy in your ideas. And there were also ideas that you reminded me through your presentation. And it's really good to always hear stories from my folks. And when we think about the future, probably what is expected is that, well, we believe that economy will be growing and developing furthermore, and more new materials will be invented and developed. And I think the society will be heading towards making things much more abundant and richer. And we are now delivering this forum from the city of Toyota, which is known for the city of manufacturing. So we think that it is important to have these perspectives of always growing bigger and bigger. But then if we step behind, when we think of future overall from a higher level, well, from a paper manufacturer perspective, I think we have already done all kind of things that we needed to do, both in terms of technology and material development. I think we have already done enough in the past. And of course, there were things that couldn't be maintained up to today, and there were things that we couldn't change. That's how we are living today. But that doesn't mean that we don't have any bright future. We have to believe what we have been doing in the past, and we should be believing what we will be doing in the future. Of course, it is good to try new ideas, but still, for us, well, paper was first invented in China a long, long time ago. That was in like in the 6th and 7th century, paper came into Japan. And Mr. Kobayashi also mentioned about the word washi, which is later introduced to differentiate the locally made paper from the Western paper. So we were never hesitant to that. And we will continue to make paper as long as there is demand. And I think that is our future. Well, for me, to come to Toyota City, I was driving the motorway from Ise, and I was driving along the Ise Bay. And the speed limit is 100 kilometers. And there are 3 lanes, and it's a very huge motorway or highway. So was all the cars overspeeding beyond 100 kilometers per hour? No, that wasn't the case. Many of the cars were driving at 70 or 80 kilometers per hour. Of course, faster than driving an ordinary road, but people were following the rules, and the fastest catch-up lane was open. So if people wanted to rush up, they could have used the outside lane to drive faster, but people were still driving at a moderate speed of 70 to 80 kilometers per hour. And of course, recently the rowdy drivers doing offensive driving has been a news, and I thought people would be driving like that, and I was worried that someone might get close to me from behind and I would be offended or be forced to drive faster. But I usually don't drive fast, and then I found out that other people are not so crazy in driving fast. What I want to tell you is that I thought that people were rushing to live, but it isn't like that actually. That's what I felt today on my way driving to Toyota City. Well, of course, it could have been simply that I was just happened to be in that kind of situation. But when it comes to accelerating the economic growth, of course, we should be rushing up with development that is good for all. But rushing up is not the only way for us to live. People can live relaxed in a relaxed manner, or people can live slowly. And that is what I am thinking, and I just wanted to share these ideas with all of you today. And let me hand it over back to the facilitator. Thank you, Mr. Nakagita. Let me now ask Mr. Usuki.
Yes, I'm Usuki. Well, today I was given this very precious opportunity. I really appreciate it. Taking this opportunity, I'll look back my career as a researcher for about 40 years. I was engaged in this research and development of materials, particularly for automobile polymer materials. So I look back my career. Well, I really wanted to make the weight of vehicles lighter. That was the motto for us to do the research. And we added additives like glass fiber, and then also carbon fibers were used for reinforced material. And in the last 4 or 5 years, after I transferred to Kyoto University, cellulose nanofiber, cellulose taken from paper, that fiber is used for reinforcement. So totally different approach was taken in the research. And recently, I keenly feel that the cellulose nanofiber is not man-made, but it's from nature. So in the forests around us, the material is always growing constantly. The CO2 is taken in, and almost every day, everywhere, cellulose fiber is growing. Japan has the forest for 70% of the land. And I heard that in Toyota City, 70 to 80% of the land is forest. So this material can be supplied only in Japan. That's also possible. So to revive industries, I think this material is most appropriate. In particular, in Toyota City here, well, there are many car manufacturers, tier 1, tier 2 suppliers are located, and a variety of related industries are flourishing. From here, this kind of material is needed from the point of view of users. If you voice, then that voice would reach to the upstream, and then the manufacturers would like to focus more on this type of research and development. And I think that the industry of Japan, it will grow more and more. Recently, I talked with the paper manufacturers often, and then if we ask them, well, please produce such and such materials, and they said, I wonder if this material will be used by car manufacturers, so we cannot produce them in volume, they say. But if auto manufacturer would say, we would like to use it, and then paper manufacturers would do more investment for the production of such products or materials. So if such kind of collaboration will be enhanced, then the new supply chain is established. And then as Japan, cellulose nanofiber used new material can be appealing to the world as a new material. So I'm aging, but I like to work harder to make this material to be applied more to automobiles. So if you are interested, well, together with me, well, we would like to work for the prosperity of this type of material. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Usuki. Next, Mr. Kobayashi, please.
My topic was on between the paper we make and the paper we grow. Well, when I turned 60 years old, I told myself that there's nothing absolute in this world. The word absolute in Japanese character means to get rid of one pair. And when I think of one pair, that pair is a yes and a no. And when we only have one pair of yes and a no, that composes the entire world. And I think this can also be applied to the subjective view and the objective view, what we see visibly and what we see from our heart. And today I got to know about the world of the nano technology from cellulose glass fiber. On the other hand, what I do is supernatural. I just use the fiber from the woods and the hemicellulose. The non-purities and oil should also be included to some extent to give the glossiness or the good touch when we do calligraphy on paper. So I make sure not to challenge the fiber so much, but we take advantage or we make the most out of the nature. We also heard from architect objective using paper tube in architecture. Again, so we have the objective view and the subjective view on paper. And kigami, the classical Japanese washi, was known always for being very strong. But today, in the modern times, new technology are coming in to make paper more stronger. So maybe the fact that kigami, the classical Japanese washi paper, will continue to survive into the next generations is more on the mental side or the heart side, I believe. And the paper tube was very interesting because actually I also make and grow my own rice. That's why I need straw. And when you really bundle the straw, it is also very strong. So even a straw, when they're being bundled, can provide a very strong power. So I can really agree on the fact that paper tubes are really strong and it really has a huge potential. And there were many takeaways from the presentations from other speakers. It was very helpful. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Kobayashi. So we would like to now ask Mr. Ban.
Well, as Mr. Nakagita mentioned, well, the society, is not really rushing, and I also feel the same way. And then related to that, I have my thought. The computer advances, and by doing that, in most of the fields, everything is making progress. For example, the banking system and also all the technologies are advancing with computers. But the very few examples or if areas that would not grow if the computer advances more, that is the architecture. And then now the designing uses the computer for designing and the structural analysis. It's indispensable, actually. However, the wonderful architecture, hundreds of years ago, that when there's no computer, but there were wonderful structures, and then we cannot build those buildings anymore. So what is necessary for the good architecture and the good buildings is that taking time for designing and also taking time for the construction with the hard work. And the computer saves time, and then not to use more the handwork or manual works. And that is computer, but by using computer, we cannot really realize the good architecture. If the technology advances, and then the architecture and also the designing would be simpler and then also in short time, but how the space can be realized by designing, and then that type of architecture cannot be realized by the advancement of the computer. So the architecture is the development of technology, and also that the good, better architecture are going the opposite way. So that I think that the typical example of the that type of the things. And also, as Suki-san, Mr. Suki-san said, that the cellulose nut fiber is what I'm interested very much. And in Osaka Expo, using this, we would like to build a pavilion. And then you have supported Showa Marusis, and then for 30 years, I've been working with them. And for automobiles, you have used cellulose with that company, and then we are talking with them, but they say, well, it's very difficult, they say, and then it's not too positive about this material. So, well, rather than the content of the product, but the researchers have closer ideas and concept to us. So, by all means, I would like to see you in person, and then we'd like to discuss the possibility of the material more in a very concrete manner. And also for Mr. Kobayashi, washi, I really love washi, but well, you put the paper on the outer wall, and then you got the moss mold, and not the traditional usage of the washi for architecture may be also found. So for that, I would like to work with him. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Ban. Well, tradition is cherished by two speakers, and also most advanced technology is applying paper for two persons. So for each panelist, do you have any questions each other? If you have, well, please take this opportunity to ask questions for other panelists. How about you, Mr. Nakagita? Do you have any question?
Well, thank you for asking. Well, paper is will be made, and we will continue to make paper as long as there is demand. We have to see what kind of demand for paper will be rising and how we'll be adapting to that. And that is something we should be thinking. And the washi that we are engaged in, well, it's very strong even if you pull the paper, but it's very weak towards abrasion, or when you try to compress or press. Well, of course, paper tube is different, but washi paper has less density, so washi can't be used for paper tube, for example. And that's the feature of washi. And we have to think on how to be able to blend all these. As Mr. Kobayashi said, we have to know how to take the advantage out of the raw ingredients. And well, that's the basics of the washi making. For example, washi for printing is something we have. And paper manufacturers of other areas would say, well, washi makes the ink blurred. But the washi in Ise that we produce, because we have been historically working on paper for printing, the Ise washi never allows the ink to be blurred. Rather, it allows the paper to, and on the other hand, we don't know how to make paper that in which the ink will get blurred. So each local area has its own paper manufacturing method, and they are doing that to come up with the strength of each of the features of the locally made paper. And we have to also actually know how our paper can be used in technology, but we don't have that kind of viewpoint. So we just have to wait those tech people to discover us. And that is why we have the All Japan Handmade Washi Association to share information with each other. When we receive inquiries, we ask each other, and that's how we build our network in this association. And by being inspired by the cutting-edge technology using paper, we should also be aware of what's going on. Or it could be that there is use of paper which was available 300 years ago, but not today. The more we go back to history, we really find out that there were different variety and use of paper. So maybe to have that kind of database in the use of paper is also interesting. Then, is there anyone who has a question to Mr. Nakagita or Mayor?
May I? Well, paper would be used as usual. That's fine. But something beyond paper would be also required. For example, that the cellulose would be dispersed in nanometer, and then it would become transparent, as I showed you the slide. And also, unexpectedly, if it is completely pressed and then air is taken out completely, and then it would not burn. So the paper has an image that it's burnable and it won't become transparent. But by using the different methods, you can find some other features of paper. So, something that would go beyond the current paper would be required. So from that point of view, do you have any development project?
May I? Please, Mr. Kobayashi. Well, up to 40 years old, when a customer will ask me to come up with a very white paper, I did bleach it with chloride. But I don't like actually using chemicals, because chemicals will make the fiber weak. And also there could be a risk of the chloride remaining in the paper. But I've been putting a lot of love in making the mulberry and then using that mulberry and then adding chemical. That's something I really don't like. But because my customers asked me to do that, I was responding to that. But after I turned 40 years old plus, I decided that I should protect my loving mulberry trees. And I will never use chemical. And that's how I told myself. Well, cellulose, the customers will ask me, why do they get together? It's not that there's starch, but when the water molecules get out, it allows to join. And things that absorb water get together or agglomerate. So even if we go up to the nanotechnology world, when things are being agglomerated and when there's air inside, or eventually when air is being removed, of course, paper will no longer be burnable. Or if you have a very thick paper and then you compress it up to like 3 millimeter thinness, well, that could be one thing. But if you spray water first and then compress it, it really becomes into a very, very strong, resilient paper. So you have to appreciate what is existing in the nature, and we're just simply applying what exists in our surroundings. When my father was making these balloon bombs during the Pacific War, and he was applying the cognac powder starch on the paper to make it strong. And by doing so, the surface becomes super strong. And if you boil it in alkaline water, the cognac powder, which is being absorbed in the paper, will become gelatinized. These are what my father was doing, and I thought of making something like that with the tent. The paper will not tear, but the starch or the adhesive to connect the papers do not stand in the weather. So we should always try to apply what is existing in the nature, and that's something I would like to hand it over to the future. Mr. Osuki?
Well, I now understanding those principles and rules, and then we like to overcome some disadvantages of the paper. If we can develop that, I think that we can explore more possibilities. Paper industry is currently slowing down because the books are not selling well. So new function should be added or incorporated in plastics. So those new applications are being developed, and we hope that we can support such a trend. And how about you, Nakagita-san?
What about thinking of developing new kinds of paper or any possibility there? Well, washi paper is something that when we think of, and when we think about paper and when we think about washi, of course there are some differences in the way we feel about it. And to make washi means, of course, we do use tools and sometimes machines, but at the same time, we bring in human power, and tools are there to enhance the artisan's power. Even at maximum, it will be several tons of force to be applied. And tools are usually handy tools, but then it's totally different from a world that needs microscope. Well, in the world of washi, we don't go up to the granularity of things that can only be seen through microscopes. But if time comes, well, we have to think about that too. And artisans really like experimenting many things. I have some ideas that pop up in my mind, and I ask those artisans, could you do this? And then they'll come back to me saying, I've come up with this output. And there are times that it really is as what I was thinking. And there are also times that comes out with a totally different thing. As much as I can, well, I do come up with some ideas, but compared to the nanotech world, we are on the opposite side. But at the same time, we can really, and we have been experimenting many things using the power of nature in paper making. So our technology is not as fine as the nano or microscope technology, but we, on the other hand, will be able to make proposal like if this is the purpose or use of paper, you can come up with this kind of paper. And this fine fiber, what is the raw ingredients?
Well, like the pine and the cedar, and so such kind of the things from the conifer. Well,
Conifer is also called the softwood, and among wood, it has a very soft and long fiber, and that is why in washi we do use conifer, but we don't use the broadleaf woods because the fiber is shorter, and you can only come up with Western paper using broadleaf wood. And also the bark of the wood. In mulberry, fiber is long and rough, but Diplomorpha has a very delicate fiber on the other hand. And if it becomes finer than Diplomorpha, then it becomes difficult to make paper with hand. That is why we need to know which raw ingredients or materials should be used for which purpose, and we might be able to seek for more potential. And this is just what I'm thinking and my ideas, but to utilize the attribute or properties of the fiber is something we should be thinking of, and in that case maybe it doesn't have to be conifer. Well, maybe you can also go for a joint development. That's a new potential.
Well, how about you, Mr. Ban? Do you have any question to any panelists? It's not the question, but as Mr. Kobayashi said, that the compressing paper, and then that is already a product, like the press board. And then the recycled paper is compressed to make very hard paper. And for what application? That is for the high pressure wire lines and then the parts. So it does not convey the electricity. So that press board is used for various parts because it's very hard. But price is very expensive. So, well, we do not use it because we do not need that high hardness. But the materials, well, the stronger is not always good. But as you said, that the paper, Nakagita-san said that well, it's strong against the pulling, but it's the weak against the compression. So I use it as a tube. So the material would not be always necessary for the stronger, but the weak materials are also useful. For example, the paper tube, it's weaker than the concrete and also the wood. So to have that, then more proportion would be necessary. So the pillar would become the thicker, and then because of that the weakness, we can create the unique forms. And iron or steels can be welded, and then it can be applied for everything, but it's not always good. The limit and also that the inconvenience for usage also makes the better ideas and better designs. So always that the big, stronger materials are not always interesting. I don't think so. And the weaker materials can be used for such proper application. But even we use it, the concrete would instantly break due to the earthquakes. But the wood and paper can be the resistant against the earthquakes. So that the strength of the material and also the seismic the resistance are not related. Therefore, that we can make the very interesting design and architecture by using wood and paper. And so strength is not what we always seem for. But the cellulose nanofiber, why I'm interested in is because that I'd like to try for Expo in Osaka, the lightweight. For example, carbon fiber is the 1/5 of the weight of the steel, and then same strength can be applied. And so what I would like to do is that like for the Banpaku or the Expo, that it's a reclaimed land, and we have to put the pillars in the land to reinforce the product, the structure. But if the materials are lightweight, and then removing the soil volume, and also that the weight of the buildings are equal, and then we don't have to use those pillars or piles. So we can reduce the construction period drastically. Therefore, in this sense, the carbon fiber and then cellulose nanofiber are the lightweight, and then that would give the new possibility for construction works. So there are various possibilities, but what I would like to say is that stronger is not always better. That is one thing. And also that the new fiber, it can be applied for different applications, and also that is a big potential. Thank you very much.
And taking this opportunity of this symposium to have every one of you to go into a joint project or development could be something very delightful. Thank you. Now we would like to thank the comments from the panelists. And before that, I would like to ask Mr. Ota, Mayor of Toyota.
Do you have to summarize or recap the panels? Yes, please. So thank you. So first, thank you very much for your presentations. So you have your own determination not to make a compromise, and I really felt that. Thank you very much. And I cannot make a recap. So instead, let me express what I am thinking right now. So when it comes to paper, I always come up with this. Recently, I do not see handwritten paper, and also we always hear the word of paperless. So to improve the efficiency, that's the trend we are seeing right now. However, what is the destination of this trend? For example, so maybe you have received hundreds of love letters, right? No, not so many. Okay, so dozens of love letters. By the way, in order to express your own feelings, the role of the paper is very important, or was very important. And when we look back the Japanese history, because we have a paper, we can trace back our history. That's what we have experienced. However, now we are seeing the paperless trend. So why is that? 3 years ago, we launched a Future City workshop. So together with companies and researchers at universities and think tanks, so several people were involved in that workshop, and we tried to identify what is a life in 50 years' time. Maybe I'm not living at that time, but we try to imagine what is a lifestyle of Japanese people in 50 years. So we couldn't find anything new. However, maybe our life will be better or more convenient. And if we seek such a future, in 50 years' time, maybe people can do everything in their own room, and all of their desires will be met. That's a life we can achieve in 50 years. However, is that really what we want? So now we have smartphones, and the functions of smartphone is being improved, and also in order to express our feelings, we don't need paper anymore because we now have the smartphones. We can send a text message or using emoji. So these are the developments we are experiencing right now. And is it really good for us? And then the theme of this symposium is create the bright future through paper. And the roles of paper and to enrich our life, to express our feelings or to receive the feelings of others. So we have used paper for these purposes. And I now feel how important the paper used to be, and especially you too have a very strong taste for paper because you're always thinking about the purpose of each paper, and you have the paper of your pride and culture, and we have to hand over this culture to the next generation. And also in the nano world, there is a development of a paper for new technologies. That's also important. So based on the past experience and the culture of a paper, how we can establish the future paper culture? That's the question we are facing now. And now we are hosting this Paper Toyota Symposium here in Toyota City. And it's a great honor for us to have this forum in Toyota City. Especially in Toyota City, we have a Toyota Obarawashi. And it is one aspect of a paper culture that Toyota City is proud of. And I believe this would be a good opportunity for you to get interested in Obarawashi as well. And also, as you mentioned, the Obarawashi would have a new development going forward and triggered by this symposium. And also starting from here, triggered by today, I hope you're going to have a new future related with paper. Again, YAPMAR members and also the secretariat and also for all 4 panelists, let me express my sincere appreciation once again. Mayor Ota, thank you very much for your comments. So now the closing time is approaching. This closes the Paper Toyota Symposium. We hope you will keep your eyes on Obara Paper and the Toyota City's Create the Bright Future Through Paper. Thank you very much for joining our symposium for a long time.